Are you looking to cut the cord with cable or satellite? Well, you've come to the right place. My name is Jesse, and welcome to Streaming TV for Beginners. Tonight's class is going to cover streaming TV. We're going to talk about what it is, how you can switch to it, and what you will need if you choose to do that. This class is being brought to you from the Massillon Public Library. We're actually live here in our recording studio, and thank you guys for joining us. This class is being presented in partnership with a couple of other libraries. So some of you may be coming to us from Louisville Public Library or Orville Public Library, and I'd like to welcome any of our patrons we have from those libraries. So tonight's class is going to focus on streaming TV, and I want to get into our topic. But before we do that, I want to kind of talk about what we do here at the Massillon Public Library. So we've been doing online technology classes for about, I would say, it's about a year actually. We do about one of them per month recently, and we do them live on YouTube about all kinds of different topics. We've done classes on online safety. We've done classes on privacy, photo editing, all kinds of stuff. We try to look for things that will help you in your daily life with technology. I'm joined tonight, as I am regularly, by Jeff, who is going to be helping us out with tonight's class. So I'm going to switch over to him and allow him to introduce himself.
Oh, hey everybody! Yeah, this is Jeff. If you've watched any of our previous shows, you'll know that I'm usually hanging out here with Jesse, helping out, and I'm also monitoring the chat. So if you guys have any questions throughout this program, please feel free to type in the chat. I'll check those out and relay anything we have over to Jesse.
Yep, excellent. So let's jump into our topic. And what I want to do at the beginning is talk about why this topic is important. And really one of the main reasons why the streaming TV tends to capture people's attention is that TV itself has changed a lot in the last 10 to 15 years. So I know, a decade or more ago, most people had a cable subscription or you had satellite. Now, all of that has changed. And as we will see, the statistics for the amount of people that have a traditional TV subscription have gone way down, and there's all kinds of new choices. And in this changing landscape, you need to know how to navigate it, right? So if you don't know what's going on, you might be paying a lot more money than you need to. You might be missing out on things that might be a very good opportunity for you. So this class is designed to give you the information you need. Our purpose tonight is to help you make an informed decision about whether streaming TV is right for you, and then be able to make the switch if you do decide that it is right for you. So we're kind of targeting anybody with this class. So if you are interested in streaming TV and learning more about it, this class is for you. We're not assuming that you're already, streaming with things like Netflix or Hulu or any of that. We're going to just kind of go from the very basics on what streaming TV is, and then we'll kind of build from there. We're going to talk about three things tonight. So our first topic is going to be why streaming TV. We're going to look at the reasons why people are switching and some of the advantages and disadvantages. We're then going to look at hardware. So you need some hardware to do this. What do you need? Finally, we're going to look at streaming services, and there are a ton of them. We will only have time to cover a small number of them, but we'll kind of give you a lay of the land, so to speak, as far as what's out there and what you might be interested in. So we've got a lot to cover tonight. As Jeff said, if you have questions as we're going through this, we'll be stopping at the end of each of our topics, and we would love to hear from you. So if you have any questions, feel free to type those in, and we will definitely try to answer them. All right, let's go ahead and get started, and we will begin by talking about why streaming TV. Okay, why streaming TV? And so for this particular point, we need to establish first what streaming TV is. Okay, that's kind of an important question, right? And streaming TV is something that I think most people kind of would understand, at least once it's explained to them. Streaming TV is basically TV that is delivered over the internet. Okay? TV delivered over the internet. So in the past, when you wanted to get TV, you would have gotten it one of two ways. Actually, three ways. Let's say one of three ways. You would have gotten it through a cable line that was running to your home, right? You would have gotten it through a satellite dish that was sitting on your home, or you would have gotten it through an antenna that was, maybe, I know we used to have those giant ones, that used to be kind of like towers, and then there are smaller ones as well. Some people had the little rabbit ears, but those were the three ways that you could get TV. Well, with the coming of the 2000s and the late 2000s, TV began to be broadcast over the internet. And so when we talk about streaming TV, what we mean is TV that is delivered over the internet. Okay, and that's pretty easy concept to get, I think. And this has been pretty revolutionary, actually. So as I mentioned, a while back, in previous decades, nobody, or a very small percentage of people did not have cable or satellite, right? So a lot of people did. Well, now that number has dropped. So there's a lot fewer people today that have cable or satellite. This trend is known as cutting the cord. And so cutting the cord has been on the rise in recent years. There's no doubt about that. And a lot of people are interested, well, how do I do that? Some statistics that you might find interesting, because I was actually talking with Jeff the other day, and I was asking him, how many people do you think have cut the cord? How many people do you think are not paying for traditional TV? And I was actually kind of surprised. I think we both were. About 1 in 4 people have cut the cord. So that's a quarter of the adults in the United States. And then over 4 out of 10 people, so 40%, don't have cable or satellite. So this is a pretty large amount of people. This isn't some little like a fringe thing that's going on, right? This is in the mainstream. A lot of people are doing this, and I think that's why we tend to get a lot of interest whenever we talk about it. What I want to do now is focus on some of the advantages and disadvantages of this. So we've talked about what it is in general, and we're going to get into more of the details as we go through. But you might be wondering, well, do I want to do this? And so maybe making a list of the pros and cons would be helpful for you. So the advantages of cutting the cord. Number one, it is generally cheaper. Okay, you generally save money when you cut the cord, although there are exceptions to that, as we will see. Number two, you only pay for what you want. So if you don't want to pay for something, you don't have to pay for that. Gone are the days when you have to pay for 100 channels that you don't watch. You don't have to pay for things that you don't want. And number three, there is no contract. There's no contract. You don't have to lock in for 2 years with streaming TV. It is a month-to-month thing. So those are some of the advantages, and it's probably sounding, pretty good right now, right? It's not an unmitigated success. There are disadvantages to cutting the cord, and I want to be honest with this. We're not trying to sell you anything. We're not trying to convince you to cut the cord. We're just giving you the information. So let's talk about the disadvantages of cutting the cord. So the biggest disadvantage of cutting the cord is that you cannot access certain content. So there might be things that you really want to see. You're not going to be able to see them in every situation using a cutting the cord service or a streaming TV service. So that's number one. Number two, there are lots and lots of subscriptions. So it can be overwhelming, and that's one of the reasons we're doing this class, is to help you kind of make your way through that maze of different subscriptions. Number three, as far as disadvantages, there is a definite lack of familiarity when it comes to streaming TV. So if you are used to your cable box and your TV guide and all of that, it's a whole new world when you cut the cord, and that can be challenging for some people, all right? That was, I think, a fairly honest look at the advantages and disadvantages. And like I said, I have no interest in you going one way or the other as far as cutting the cord or staying with traditional TV. We're trying to just be fair here and present you all the information. Now, this raises an important question, right? So we've got kind of some of the information right now, and you might be wondering, well, is streaming TV right for me, right? Is streaming TV right for an individual person? And unfortunately, I can't tell you that, because that answer is very kind of dependent on what you want. As we will see, there are certain situations where cutting the cord could be almost like a no-brainer. Like it would make a lot of sense. On the other hand, there could be situations where it doesn't make a lot of sense, because you're not going to be able to get what you want, or it will be very expensive for you to do so, or maybe inconvenient. So I want you, as we go throughout the rest of this class, to keep that question in mind and always be thinking, is this right for me? Is this something I would be interested in doing? And so that'll kind of guide us throughout the rest of this class. So we're just getting started. But what I want to do now is pause and see if we have any questions, or if Jeff has anything that he would like to add on this topic. So let's check in with Jeff.
Yes, so far, no questions. I think it's early days here. But I think going back to what Jesse said, it is important to kind of figure out if cutting the cord is right for you. And for some people, it's a difficult situation. I think you get used to having cable or satellite. Where all your channels are. What you have. It's very convenient. But there are a lot of options, out there with cutting the cord. Yeah. So I think we cut the cord. I can't even remember how long ago, and I'm been fairly happy with how that's worked out since.
Awesome. Yeah, and hopefully what we're going to be talking about today will help people, make that decision, as you were saying. So awesome. Well, we'll be checking in again here in a little bit to see if there's any other questions. All right, let's go ahead and we'll keep on moving on here. So we've talked about why streaming TV, why people do it, why it's something that is kind of becoming popular. Now what I want to do is look at the hardware that is involved in cutting the cord and in accessing streaming TV. So the hardware is kind of the first thing that we need to get into before we talk about those streaming services. And so when we talk about hardware, there are two things that we kind of absolutely need in order to access streaming TV. What do we need? We need, number one, an internet connection. You absolutely have to have an internet connection. I was saying streaming TV is delivered over the internet. It's not going to work too well without that internet connection. And number two, you are going to need a device to access services. Okay, so the internet connection is useless if you don't have a device that can get you to the services that you want to access. So we're going to look at both of those things as we go throughout this next section. And we'll start with the internet connection, okay? When it comes to internet connection, there are some confusing things. There are some technical things that we need to kind of get our heads around. And so number one, when it comes to those technical things, and this is actually a piece of what you could call technical jargon. Number one, we need to know how fast our internet is. And the word that is used for that, and this is the technical jargon, is bandwidth. Bandwidth. What is bandwidth? We need to know that, right? So we need to know if we have internet that is fast enough. So bandwidth, the best way that I can describe it is the amount of data that you can transfer in any given moment. So usually we would measure this in seconds. Okay, it's the amount of data that you can transfer in any given moment. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, what are you talking about? What does that even mean? I want to use an illustration to kind of show what this means. And my illustration is actually kind of weird. It's actually a plumbing illustration. And you're probably thinking that's a little strange. So I'm going to show you an image, and I want you to tell me what you think the answer to this is. Let's say you're trying to fill up a bucket. Let's say, you know, a 5-gallon bucket, right? And you're trying to fill it up with water, and you have hoses that look like this. On the left, you have a tiny garden hose. On the right, you've got a giant fire hose. The question that I pose to you is, which hose will fill up which bucket quicker? I don't think I need to pause for too long, right? Most people are going to say the fire hose, of course, right? Why do you say that? It's actually because the fire hose is what? It's bigger, right? The fire hose is bigger. You can get more water through the fire hose in any given second. That is bandwidth. We talk about it as speed, and so it is kind of speed, but it's more like how much stuff can you get in a given second. And the stuff we're talking about isn't water. The stuff is data. The stuff is information. How many bits and bytes can we get in a given second? So when it comes to measuring bandwidth, we measure it using something called megabits per second. Okay, megabits per second. And megabits per second is basically kind of like miles per hour. You know, in a car, it's a unit of measure. A megabit is a lot of bits. It's 1,000,000 bits. And a bit is the smallest amount of data that you can have. It's a 0 or a 1. So when we talk about bandwidth, we're measuring it in megabits per second. What you can do, if you look on the bill for your internet service provider, it will probably somewhere on that bill say how many megabits per second you are paying for. That's the amount of bandwidth that you are paying for. Okay, so that's a good thing to know. Number one is, how much am I actually paying for? Number two, you could do a speed test and maybe figure out how much you're actually getting. And I can actually show you that here real quick. So if you bear with me here for a second, we'll switch over to our computer here. And if you go to a website called fast.com, F-A-S-T.com, and you just hit enter, it'll do a bandwidth test for you immediately. So you will know this, and you can do this on a mobile device, like a smartphone. So right now we have 230 megabits per second here at the library, which is pretty good. It's a good idea to do that just to see, you know, what is my speed? Am I getting what I'm paying for, right? So that's number one. Number two, there's the question of, well, how much do I need? How much bandwidth do I need? And so I have a general guideline for this that I'm going to share with you. It's not set in stone or anything like that, but I would say that in general, you need at least 20 megabits per second to stream and then do other things at the same time. That could be browse the web. It could be, you know, do email, social media. I'd say 20 megabits per second is kind of like the low end of what you would want. Ideally, you might want more. So, you know, a lot of ISPs will offer you maybe 50 or maybe 100 or maybe 200 megabits per second. But you know, 20 is kind of like the bottom of what I would want if I was going to be streaming TV. All right. So the next thing that you would want to look for in your internet connection is that you do not, in an ideal world, you do not want what are called data caps. Okay, data caps. And so, so what is a data cap? A data cap is honestly, it's an artificial limit on the amount of data you can download in a given period of time, usually per month. And so, so Jeff and I were talking about this the other day, and I know he was kind of sharing his experiences. Maybe we could switch over to him and see. So in my experience, I have Spectrum at home, and I do not actually have data caps that I'm aware of. But I think Jeff was kind of familiar with some of the other internet service providers. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yeah, so we were talking about where I live. I have Masslink Cable TV, and if you kind of like log in, like where you pay your bills online, Masslink Cable will actually show you how much bandwidth you're using per month, but they do not currently charge you. So it's kind of a neat way to just see, you know, per month what you're actually downloading and how much you're using. But I do know we have a friend who uses, I think it's Uverse, AT&T's product, and they do have data cap on their downloads. I do not know what it is off the top of my head. So there's many ISPs out there, and each one seems like they're kind of doing their own thing or looking to see what they want to offer.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to pull you in there, Jeff, because that it is interesting that depending on the ISP that you have, you may or may not have a data cap. So it's a good thing to know. I would check with your ISP if you are interested in whether or not you have a data cap. If you do have a data cap, it's not the end of the world. But the thing is, and the reason I say ideally you don't want one, you are going to be downloading lots of data, right? So as you stream TV, that's all you're doing. In fact, is you're downloading data constantly. You will chew through a data cap, especially if it's low. If it's like 100 gigabytes or something per month. If you stream every day, you will probably chew through that before the month is over, and then you might be in a situation where you have to pay for more, and there's some problems that can emerge. So definitely, if you can, get in a situation where you don't have a data cap. That's the best situation that you can be when it comes to streaming TV. All right. So we've talked enough about the internet connection. What I'd like to do now is talk about the devices that you will need in order to connect to a streaming service. Okay. And when it comes to devices, there are a bunch of different ones out there. And this is a good thing and a bad thing. It's good because you may already have one. It's bad because, well, there's a lot to kind of take in. But we'll try to break it down for you here. So when it comes to devices, you can connect to streaming TV through a smart TV, which a lot of people already have. You can connect through streaming media players, and these are things like Roku's, Fire TV devices. You can connect through game consoles, which maybe you have, or maybe your children or grandchildren have. And then finally, you can connect through other devices like laptops, Blu-ray players, etc. So you have a lot of options when it comes to the devices you can connect with. What I want to do is talk about two devices in particular. The reason that I'm talking about these two devices, these types of devices, is that I think they are probably the most popular types of devices that people are going to be streaming with, right? Number one is going to be streaming's on my mind. Smart TVs. Smart TVs. So these are internet connected TVs, right? And I think a lot of people have these. In fact, I think it's challenging to not go to a store and buy a smart TV, if I recall correctly. So smart TVs, you probably are already using one. Let's talk about advantages and disadvantages. So as far as advantages, a smart TV is going to be very convenient for you to stream with because you already have it, maybe, right? So you don't have to get anything else. You're also going to be able to use a single remote, which is a pretty nice thing. You don't have that situation where you've got 5 remotes, and you're like, which remote turns on the TV and which does this and which does that. I know a lot of people get into that. You kind of avoid that with the whole smart TV thing. Now, as far as disadvantages of smart TVs, number one, they are potentially very slow, or they can be slow. Now, newer ones probably aren't going to be very slow, but as they get older, they can become slow because the TV is a TV, and then it's kind of got this extra little computer built into it. A lot of times that computer isn't very powerful. So it can be potentially slow. Number two, it can have a limited selection of streaming services. So if there is a particular streaming service that you want to watch, it may or may not be available on your smart TV. Number three, you can't upgrade a smart TV without, of course, upgrading the entire TV. And that's expensive, and people don't want to do that. So when it comes to, maybe you have an older smart TV and it struggles to run Netflix, or it struggles to get onto YouTube, you can't really just reach in there and upgrade the smart TV part of it, right? Yeah, you either have to get a new TV or look elsewhere. Okay, and that's where the streaming media players come in. Streaming media players are devices that are, there's different ones. Some of the most popular would be the Roku devices or the Fire TV devices. I'm going to show you some of these just so we know what we're talking about. So when it comes to streaming media players, we'll look at Roku devices first. So this is Roku's website, and you can see they have different devices here. So I have the Roku streaming stick, as it turns out, but there are cheaper ones. They go from as low as like $30 all the way up, so you can see you can get the better, more powerful ones. But honestly, I've never had a problem with the one that I have, the streaming stick. And then they have some audio stuff as well. So that would be the Rokus. Now, as far as another option within the streaming media players, there's the Fire TV devices, and these are Amazon associated. So if we look at those, you have the Fire TV stick. You have, I believe they have a box. Yeah, the Fire TV Cube. So they've just got different versions of the same thing. Basically, all of these streaming media players are just going to be it's either a stick or it's a box that you will just plug into your TV. It has its own remote, and then you just go from there. It's almost like a cable box, but it's for streaming TV, right? It's not for a cable provider. All right. What are the advantages of streaming media players? So number one, streaming media players are generally much faster when it comes to performance. They're generally much faster. You also are going to have access to more services on a streaming player. So the Roku is a great example of that, where any streaming channel out there, unless they have some kind of they're in some kind of fight with Roku, their channel's probably going to be available on the Roku. As far as disadvantages, it's not like these are the perfect devices, right? Disadvantages, number one, it's an extra purchase for you. You have to buy something else, which nobody likes that. Number two, they require an HDMI port. And so the HDMI port is the little port on the back. And if you have multiple devices, let's say, your kids have an Xbox or PlayStation, and then you've got a Blu-ray player, and then you've got a cable box, you can run out of those ports pretty quickly, right? So this does require another port. But overall, I like the streaming players. I'll admit that. I do want to say something. As we talk about hardware, I would be remiss if I did not talk about antennas, okay? Antennas. And so the reason that I want to include this, although it's not technically streaming TV, antennas are a great way to get local channels for free. So you may or may not know, but the local channels, so I'm talking around here, it would be 3, 5, 8, 19, there's other ones. Those channels are all still broadcast over the air for free. So you can get access to those if you just put up an antenna and plug it into your TV. That's all that there is to it. I know people who've done this, and you get pretty good results. You can, in some cases, get 1080p, or I think it's 1080i technically, or 720, which is pretty good. Some of them are a little lower resolution, and then some of them, like, you have to point the antenna a different way, and we're far enough away from Cleveland that it can be kind of challenging to get like all of the channels. But the antenna is a great option if you are looking to still get those local channels. You can get antennas anywhere. You can get them at a store, you can get them online, and then you just need somewhere to put it. If you really want to get the best reception, they make antennas that go on your roof or in an attic, and they're big and they have a wider, longer range, and that will help you connect to different channels. So that is it for hardware. We got the internet connection that we got to think about. We have the devices that we need, like the Roku or the smart TV or the Fire TV. And then we also have antennas. That's an interesting little aside there that will help us get to some free TV, right? Let's check back in with Jeff and see if he has any thoughts.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, so on those streaming sticks that you plug into the HDMI port, I believe most of those work off of Wi-Fi. So you're going to have to, make sure that you have Wi-Fi in your home to have that kind of stick work. Right. But I was going to ask you, do you have any preference of whether you're using Wi-Fi or if you're plugging something in like a gaming console? Is there performance advantages either way, or is it pretty much the same?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would say if you could plug it in, it's probably going to be better. I mean, the bandwidth on a wired connection is obviously going to be higher, although with some of the newer Wi-Fi, that may not be the case. But it does become a thing of convenience. And I know I have the Roku streaming stick, and it does not have an Ethernet port. So for those of you, an Ethernet port is the actual port that you would plug the cable in that would go to your router or your modem. So I don't have that option with the player that I have. But if I had one of the maybe higher end players that did have that, and I had, the ability to do that, I probably would do it if I could. I just feel like it's, a little bit of a better experience if you can do it. But it's not the end of the world if you can. I mean, what do you do at home out of curiosity?
So I use my smart TV, which is Wi-Fi.
Okay, yeah.
So I haven't had any issues. I don't think I've streamed anything in 4K, but yeah. I don't know. Like bandwidth might be an issue with 4K.
Right. Yeah, probably would. Yep. All right, yeah. Excellent. So let's go ahead and we will move on from the hardware, and we will now look at streaming services. So we've talked about why streaming TV. We have talked about the hardware, and there's some different considerations. What I want to do now is talk about the streaming services that are out there. And this is one area where there is a lot going on. There are a lot of streaming services out there. We are not going to have time to look at all of them, as a matter of fact, because there's just so many. As we were doing this, we were kind of preparing, and it's like, well, man, we didn't talk about this one and this one and this one, and it even gets kind of, I'm going to present some categories to you to kind of make it a little easier to understand, break it down. But then there's streaming services that kind of blur the line between those categories. So this is probably the most overwhelming piece of the streaming TV puzzle. As far as different types of streaming services, there are several big divisions that you can make. So number one, as far as traditional streaming TV, there are video on demand services. And we'll get into this more, but I mean things like Netflix or Hulu, if you're familiar with that. And we will talk about that a little bit more. Number two, we have live TV services. So these are services that are basically going to be recreating cable or satellite for you. You have a package of channels and you watch them. Number three, we have purchase or rental services. These are kind of like a digital Blockbuster, for those of you who remember the old Blockbusters that we all used to go to. And number four, we have free services. And there are a lot of different types of free services out there. And it's a really good value because you're obviously not paying anything. So we're going to go through each of these different types of services and talk about what examples of that service are, and then what it's like and what are some of the pros and cons of each. So we'll start with video on demand services, okay, or VOD is an acronym that's used. Video on demand. Video on demand services include things like Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime. Disney Plus is a newer one that's very popular. Paramount Plus is a newer one. Peacock is a newer one. So you notice I'm saying newer one a lot. These things are popping up all over the place. So these video on demand services, it seems like everybody, every type of content provider, every company is coming out with their own video on demand service. As far as what these look like, I can't show you too much, unfortunately, because we would have to have like an account. But what I can do is show you the website for one of the more popular ones and also one of the newer ones, which is going to be Disney Plus. And so a lot of the families with kids and stuff are really into the Disney Plus because it's got all the things that their kids like, right? So this is the website for Disney Plus. And so you can see Disney actually owns ESPN and Hulu. So you know how I was talking about this being confusing? You can get all three of those. These are all different streaming services for, I think it's like $14 a month or something like that. You can see Disney's got your like Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, all that kind of stuff. And you can go on their site and see all the things that they have access to. So you're getting movies and TV shows in a service like Disney Plus. So video on demand obviously means you can watch whatever you want whenever you want. There's no concept of like, oh, I have to be in front of the TV at 8 o'clock on Wednesday night to watch my show. No, you can actually watch your show anytime. And as a matter of fact, you can probably watch every episode that has ever existed for that show at 8 o'clock or at 7 a.m. on Thursday if you would want. People call it binging on these TV shows. That's what they're talking about. So these video on demand services have a lot to offer. Let's talk about the advantages right now. So the advantages of video on demand services. Number one, you have an absolutely massive catalog of content that you can get to. So, I'm talking hundreds of shows and movies, and oftentimes the back, episodes of a show. There's a lot of stuff, right? Number two, they are very affordable. So this is by far the best value when it comes to streaming TV is the video on demand services. Okay, it's very affordable. And then number three, as far as advantages, you get a lot of exclusive content on video on demand services. So like, for example, we looked at Disney Plus. You can't get that content anywhere else, at least in the US, in most situations. All right. So as far as disadvantages go, you have no live sports or news, right? So the Disney Plus isn't going to, or Netflix aren't going to give you, the 24-hour cable news network, whichever one you prefer. It's not going to give you the live football game, that's probably coming up here in a little bit, Thursday night football, right? You're also not going to be able to get specific content that you want. And by that, I mean, if you want a specific show, that show may or may not be on Netflix. And so you might have to get another subscription to be able to get to that show. And what happens is if you start adding those subscriptions together, that becomes a lot of money. And that was one of the reasons why we all wanted to cut the cord, right? Was to save money. Well, sometimes it's not actually like that. Sometimes you have so many subscriptions that you're in the same predicament you were before. All right. So that is video on demand services. So that's the number one, I would say, type of service that's out there. Now, number two, we have the live TV services, okay? Live TV services. And basically what these are services that recreate cable and satellite. So you know how with cable or satellite, you pay a certain amount of money per month and you get this whole package of channels, and then you can watch any or all or none of those channels, and it doesn't matter, right? You're just paying for access to them, and they're live. You see, at 8 o'clock on Wednesday, kind of like we were talking about before, there is something playing there, and you can record it in some cases, right? So that's how live TV services work in the streaming world. popular live TV services, well, it include a few, and I know one of these Jeff and I both have had experience with, which is YouTube TV. YouTube TV is probably I would say the most popular one, at least in my circle of influence. I know a lot of people who have used YouTube TV. Sling TV is another one that's out there. This was kind of one of the originals as far as this whole live TV movement. It's owned by Dish, actually. And then Hulu with live TV. So this is where it's confusing. There is like regular Hulu that's a video on demand service. And then there's Hulu with live TV added on to it. And so that's Hulu, but it's called Hulu with live TV, right? It's kind of confusing, but some of the lines are kind of blurred with some of these services. Let's talk about the advantages and the disadvantages of live TV services. So number one, as far as advantages, you have access to live sports and news. And then you also have access to cable channels. So we're talking like the channels that you would likely see on cable, like, HGTV. I know when I do this class, that's always a popular one. You could get 2 channels like that. Finally, you would have no contract with live TV, which is in contrast to traditional cable or satellite. As far as disadvantages go, live TV is very expensive. So YouTube TV, I believe the price now is $65 per month, which is getting up there to almost the level of regular TV, right? There's also the lack of familiarity. If you're trying to replace your cable or your satellite, it's not going to be the same when it comes to one of these live TV services. It's the same stuff, but you know how you have one of these and I hit, when I used to have cable, it was 33 was ESPN, and I was a big sports fan, so I would just, 33, I know where to go. I think 31 was, baseball and basketball and that kind of stuff. You don't have that with these live TV services. You have to go through their app, and if you're not used to that, that could be kind of clunky and maybe kind of inconvenient. So that's something to keep in mind when you think about switching to one of these live TV services. But as I mentioned, I've used YouTube TV for quite a while now, and you get used to it after a while. It becomes normal, but it just takes a little bit of time. All right. The next type of streaming service that's out there is the purchase or rental services. And these services are kind of like your digital Blockbuster, right? So we talked about that earlier. You used to go to Blockbuster and you used to go around the store and you'd browse and you'd say, oh, I want to watch this movie. And you'd take it to the register and they would say that'll be $5 and you got to bring it back 2 days from now. And you'd watch it and you'd bring it back. This is the exact same idea, as a matter of fact. Popular purchase and rental services that you may have heard of or maybe not include Vudu, which is owned by Walmart, and then Amazon Prime. Many of you have an Amazon Prime subscription, maybe. You get the free shipping, quick shipping. You also have access to a lot of on-demand stuff for free that we already talked about, but then you can pay to rent movies through Amazon Prime. To show you an example of this, so we have the site for Vudu on here. So what I'm going to do is hop over to my screen, and you can see this looks like kind of like a Redbox, right? I think Redbox those are still around, right, Jeff? Redboxes?
Yes.
Yeah. So those are kind of like little kiosks you rent from. This is like that, but just the web version of that. And you can see there's all kinds of things. You can rent. You can also buy things on here. So this is kind of one of those types of deals. They also have free stuff. Apparently on Vudu. So that's an example of a purchase or rental service. Now, as far as the advantages and disadvantages of these types of services, the advantages, and number one, you have a really wide selection of things that you can get access to. So if there is a particular movie that you want to watch, odds are you're going to be able to find it through one of these services. Number two, it's on-demand access, right? Anytime you want to watch it, it's yours, and you can rent something within seconds, if you have your credit card added to these services. As far as disadvantages go, these are very expensive if you think about a value, so an example, to rent a movie on one of these services could be $5, it could be $10. If it's a brand new movie that's like in the theaters, they started doing this where you can pay $20 or maybe $30 to rent that movie and watch it. And you only have a limited amount of time to watch it. So it is very expensive as far as you could say a bang for your buck kind of way of thinking, right? It's going to be more expensive. We've talked about a lot, but we have one more thing to talk about for streaming services, and that it would involve the free services that are out there. And the free services, I think a lot of people are interested in because, we're looking to not pay any money if we can get away with it, right? So when we talk about free services, there are lots of different kinds, actually. So I'm going to show you some of the popular ones. So the number one, as far as popular free TV services, would involve not YouTube TV, Pluto TV. So Pluto TV is kind of cool. You go to it, and it's got a bunch of live channels you can watch. Now, we're not talking like cable channels, but they're channels. They show reruns and stuff like that. And then you also can get to on-demand content. Tubi is the same type of thing. So Pluto TV and Tubi are very similar to each other. As far as other free things, though, YouTube is actually a great source of content. I don't know if you guys watch it a lot, but you can find tons of stuff on YouTube, including movies, like actual like Hollywood movies that you can just stream for free. And then finally, since we're a library, we offer a service called Hoopla that you can go to, and basically you use your library card and you can access a certain number of things for free in a given month. And they have music, movies, TV shows, audiobooks, all kinds of stuff. So that's Hoopla, and you can find that on our website if you are interested. All right. That, I think, is about it for the streaming services. There's a lot of stuff in there that by far took the largest amount of time in tonight's class. Let's check in with Jeff.
Just to pile on the streaming services, there were a couple that you might have missed that weren't on like the initial sheet.
Right.
Discovery Plus also exists, so that's going to give you like your, I think, Discovery and TLC and whatever, History Channel, all those things that kind of go together. And then there's HBO Max, so you can get a lot of the content that HBO offers. And I believe they also have a version of their service where you can watch new movies that are coming out at the same time they come out at home with like a higher tier subscription. So
right. Yeah, and you mentioned HBO Max the other day, and I totally forgot to include it. So I'm glad that you mentioned it.
Yeah, and there's probably more that we're forgetting here. So.
And they're coming out like, it seems like every few months there's a new one that's announced. So it is kind of an interesting time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do a little recap of what we talked about in tonight's class. So we talked about a lot. Why streaming TV was the first thing we discussed. We talked about some of the pros and cons of streaming TV. We talked about, the question, is it right for you? And hopefully you've arrived at a better answer to that as a result of this class. We also looked at hardware, the internet connection, the devices, even antennas, and then finally streaming services, the content you actually want to get and all of the different types of streaming services that are out there. There's a lot going on with streaming TV. And if you are still, using traditional cable or satellite, you might be kind of overwhelmed. And hopefully this class made it a little less overwhelming for you. this is still a new and growing area, right? There are new services coming out every few months, it seems like, and services will close, and some of them are getting merged together, and there's a lot of things happening. Overall, though, I would say in today, in 2021, streaming TV is definitely a viable option for you. There's a lot of people who have went to it exclusively, and there's a lot, there's a lot out there. Now, do you have to do that? No. And do we want you to do that? No, we want you to make the best decision for you. And so we wanted to provide you with the information that you need to make that decision. So I want to check in with Jeff and see if he's got any, final kind of closing thoughts before we wrap it up.
No, I mean, I would say I agree. Streaming is very viable right now. It's just, you just make sure, you do your research. If you're going to, cut the cord, make sure you have the bandwidth and really kind of research those streaming services and which ones you tend to watch, the programming that's involved with it. And you can definitely save yourself some money and still watch the content that you want to watch. Yeah, I totally agree. So, streaming TV, if you have any questions for us, I'm going to put our information up on the screen. You're welcome to give us a call, 330-832-9831, and then dial extension 344. You can also reach us by email at trainer@massillonlibrary.org. So remember, streaming TV is an option for you. If you know what you're looking for, you can navigate that changing landscape. And if you so choose, you too can cut the cord. So thank you guys for watching, and we will see you next time.